Hello, everybody. Welcome to a live version of From the Bench. Just in having a conversation today about a lot of the recent events. I mean, you go down a laundry list: murders, police brutality, racial tensions, protests, peaceful protests, and all of the uh, conversations that are going on right now through the media, through people. And we just wanted to bring those conversations home to basically give ourselves an opportunity to speak intelligently to each other and to others about how we can make everything in this world and every person we come across better. So, having started with that today, we want to kind of go around and let everybody kind of introduce themselves and kind of where they're from a little bit and how these topics of the day are affecting them right now. And let's start with Ayana Mitchell. Go ahead, Ayana.
Okay, hey y'all. Ayana Mitchell. I am a former LSU basketball player. Just recently graduated. I am from Conyers, Georgia, and I come from a big family, a baby of six. And right now, my family has moved to Atlanta. And with everything going on in Atlanta, they're kind of like in the middle of everything. There has been a curfew set. It was at 9 p.m. Now it's at 7. Um, my sister owns businesses and things of that sort, and it's kind of like slowed down her progress as far as like growing and branching out and things like that. But I'm still here on campus, back at school in Louisiana, and it's just a different feel. I think ever since like the coronavirus is just the world has been different in all aspects of everything, just being shut down, not being able to walk across the stage, and to now transition into the whole rioting and protesting and everything like that. It's just been different. I don't think the world will ever go back to normal based off of the events that have happened back to back to back. So right now I'm in a position where my generation, my class, my teammates, friends, they want to be heard, and they're doing it the best way that they know how, because I look at my generation and what we've been taught and what we see, and what we've experienced through our lives, it's a lot of brokenness that we've experienced. And so we're handling things based off of what we know and what we've seen. And so with a lot of things, you have the peaceful protests, but you also have the rioting and stuff, and that goes with the lack of intelligence that I think my generation has. The lack of emotional connection that we had, like that we don't have with other people, so we're experiencing it and we're expressing it um, in a different way. And so just to be here, be in this situation is very new and uncomfortable for me. Um, but I really just want, you know, my generation to be able to voice themselves in the best possible way.
Thanks, Yana. And Anthony, you visited with us before. Obviously, you spent some time. You had very, very eloquent words about when Ahmaud Arbery was murdered, and I think those resonated and touched quite a few people. I know the feedback that we've gotten. Um, Explain a little bit more again about you, and then also, some of your observations for the last, few days.
I'm 35 from Pomona, California, assistant Pepperdine University, and I think that when I see this stuff, I mean, it touches, it touches me in a way just because I've been there, right? Like I've been on the side of the road, pulled over, cops, gun drawn, haven't done anything, just trying to get myself home. Like, and I mean, when I was 24 to 30, it was probably happening about at least getting pulled over, stopped and searched at least every 6 months. And so when you see that and you see the loss of somebody's life, like I realized that for the grace of God, like it could have been me. So like, how does that not hit a spot? I think right now as America, we're in a very different spot to have conversations about it, just because of honestly because of COVID-19, because everybody is home, right? Like I think normally everybody watch the video and get back to going. They get back with their day, get back to practice, get back to all that other stuff. But I think we're in a spot now where we're kind of forced to see it and have conversations about it. And I think that's good in some aspects. And I think also being at home has led to some of just the frustration and the anger that you're seeing. I think people being cooped up and that anger coming out, I think is awesome to see people coming together to protest. I think that's fantastic. And I guess, you talk about some of the rage that the protesters have and people who've never experienced the powerlessness of being pulled over and having somebody else have your life in their hands, that powerlessness, like they don't understand the frustration and anger that comes with that. And then when you go out to protest and see somebody in full riot gear staring at you, like, and you've already in your life several times realized that your life has been in their hands, and the anger that comes with that, like, it's kind of hard to say don't be angry. It's kind of hard to say, like, hey, like, why can't it just not escalate when you've never experienced that pain, anguish, and that feeling of hopelessness for an issue that people have been saying has been going on for, well, pretty much since this country started, and it gets dismissed most of the time until you actually have somebody with a camera that videos it for 10 minutes and you watch it. And so I understand it. And I think, like she said, I think America's in a very strange place to have these things go on. I don't think there's a way to go back to status quo or life as it was before.
Yeah, and I think, we've got a group of people here today, I think, that are from kind of all different pockets of, the United States. Anthony, you're out west, Yana's Georgia, and then Rusty, you're in Texas, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, in East Texas, at East Texas Baptist University in Marshall, Texas. So, yeah, my heart sincerely breaks just for everything that's going on. And I don't know if I'd say in a different way, but me and Coach Mitchell are good friends. We talked for an hour and a half the other day about this. And I think the thing that why me and Coach Mitchell both feel so drawn to it is, for me, I got saved. I'm a follower of Jesus. I profess faith in Christ, and that is very, very important to me. I didn't grow up that way. I got saved in college. I grew up in West Texas, and very different demographics. There was probably 50% white, 40% Hispanic, and very few African Americans. And so I wasn't raised around the African American culture a lot around a lot of Hispanics, great friends of mine to this day. But I come from a different perspective. And when I got saved, I was led to faith by the men's and women's basketball team at Howard Junior College, who were all African Americans. And so that right there transformed my view of life, just feeling a love and a peace that came from people that were different from me. I was a white country boy from West Texas that went to play baseball, and God's love just transcended all those barriers because I was brought in by basketball players that were different race, and they were from all over the country. And so for me, the thing I've tried to live my life with is we have to ask better questions, and for me, it starts with, what do we really, really want as a educational system, as a family system, and as a people? And I think we don't ask the right questions, and I think we don't deal in truth. That's where I stand. I think so many people say they want something, but the way they're going about it is not right and not healthy. We're not going to get peace from hatred. We're not going to get peace and honor from dishonor. We want a leadership of our country that is honoring of our people and honoring of that position, but we promote dishonor. And so for me, in the way we do it with our program, the way I raise my 3 girls and my wife, like we try to ask better questions of what is really going to produce the right outcomes, and is there a better way? And so everything I will say, honestly, will come from a perspective of the Christian faith, because black, white, brown, rich, poor, tall, short, none of that matters to me. It's truly about who people are in their spirit. I think a lot of people say that, but our fruit shows where our heart is. And so that's where, for me, will come from in a lot of my perspectives.
And I think what you said there was good, asking better questions and hearing the truth. And, unfortunately, and the truth sometimes isn't pretty, and it's not easy to, hear it. and it's not easy to admit it to yourself. I know as a white person understanding race, too long and too many times people have said, it's you want to learn necessarily from people of color, but the reality is you need to learn yourself, because we live in a culture that has been brought up to think that white is good, and that's not necessarily always the truth. So and Derek, obviously you and Rusty are good friends, and obviously you're coming from, again, another different part of the country. What are some things that you wanted to talk about today?
Just to piggyback on all of them, listening to to Ms. Mitchell and Mr. Mason and Coach Rainbow, when we are good friends, is that I think what we want is accountability. I think that's what everybody is saying, that when these things happen, there has to be a level of accountability that's fair across the board. Anytime there's discretion about whether something is fair or not, it leads to this. This is not just this one instance. This is a whole bunch of issues. Hearing Mr. Mason talk about the powerlessness of being pulled over, those feelings are shared by so many, and that's what you see in the street. I'm always short to call them riots as opposed to call them rebellions, because I feel like these are the people speaking back. And like I said again, you have to listen. And that's why I say when Coach Rainbow called me the other day, and that's what I love so much about him. He asked a good question. Like he said, he said, what can I do? And my question to him was, if Rusty's been doing what he always done, which is love on people, he doesn't have to put out a tweet. That's what I told you. You don't have to put out anything. If people know who you are, and like I said again, those words can be hollow. You could put out the perfect words and you demean kids and you've done wrong by those kids, it's going to come out. So your words are hollow. But if you've been by those kids, if you coached the demographic the same, the black kid, the white kid, the Asian kid, if you coached them all the same, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. Your conscience is clear. It's those of us that you've done something wrong. You use that privilege. You've done it. That's now when you're apprehensive to, am I going to get called out? But if you haven't done that, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. And that's what I always tell all of my friends, no matter that color. Right is right. This is a wrong and right issue. This is not a black and white issue. This is a wrong and right issue. These are obvious wrongs that can easily be righted. And there are a bunch of underlying issues that I'm sure we'll discuss, but this is a right or wrong issue, and it's blatant. And that's what's so harmful for people that look like me, and not even that look like me, but people that know that that's wrong and are waiting for something to happen to it.
I think it's a very Derek, what you touched on. I mean, obviously, we are of the generation that is the next, right? And we are coaching the next generation. And Yana kind of touched on this. So going back the other way, Derek, I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
How are you there for your players? How are you managing that conversation? What are you wanting that generation to now be about, do about, say about? Because obviously they are the generation of social media. They are the generation of getting out there. So, I mean, it's just a different platform than what we all grew up with. So
right.
We kind of talked about where we are as a generation, us, but then now what's the next?
What I speak to mine about is having more of a voice. I don't want to queer it. I want to know what they're thinking, but I want it to be educated. I don't want you saying anything that you don't really know about. Research, this is history. What you're seeing right now is history repeating itself. So that's what I encourage my young men to do in our chats and in our group messages, is that we want to talk about what's going on. We want to talk about solutions. We don't want to go. I'm not encouraging them to incite rage at all. What I want to do is that I want them to ask Coach, why might this be happening? Or Coach, what's your perspective on this? And I want to get theirs, because a lot of times, and you even know on the court, a lot of times we think we have all the answers, but they see it a different way. So I want to make sure I can answer all their questions by making sure I've heard all of their questions. So I encourage them to talk more to me. I don't want them in a shell, but I also am honest, because I only coach black young men right now. I've only, I haven't coached a white player since I was with Rusty, but they've seen these things happen in their community. Like they know what Mr. Mason's talking about. So these aren't just conversations now. These are daily conversations for us in our program. And it's not so much about, again, the color of their skin. It's about right and wrong. I will go to bat for you like my mother's always told me. If you're 100% right, I'll sell the house for you. I'll sell the farm. But if you're wrong, I can't do anything. And that's irregardless of color. So I always tell them if they do right and follow them. And I try to encourage them from using those words.
Rusty, how about you?
Yeah, we talk from a program standpoint because we are a Christian institution, and that is the single most important focus of our educational process on this journey with these young ladies. Yeah, we're academics and yeah, we're athletics, but the first and most important thing is their walk with the Lord, and people understand that when they come here, so you get that. But I actually, with this topic in the last couple of weeks, before I even addressed it with my team, I actually called a few people, Coach Mitchell being the first, and I asked him a lot of questions. And a few of the things that he said to me that was very, very reassuring was because he knows he said it like, I've coached black kids, Hispanic kids, white kids, Asian. It doesn't matter to me. Between the lines, I'm the same to everybody. Get your butt on the line and run. Like, get after it. Compete. It doesn't. There's no discrimination. We step off the court. We understand there are some differences that we all have to face. But my voice to our players is exactly what I said. We have to ask better questions, and we have to deal in truth. And the truth for me is everything that we've done isn't changing anything. So we have to look at things a different way. And I would just say it for me, we promote, what does the word of God say? What is Christ? How did Christ come and just strip down those barriers? And we really try to live our life that way and promote peace, promote forgiveness, promote truth and dialogue. And so before I ever even addressed our team, I talked to Coach Mitchell and a few others. And one thing he said, Coach, you don't have to prove anything. You stand in the middle on God's word. You don't have to support the white. And I asked him very directly, do you feel like you have to stand on the side of black versus white? And he said some things, but he said, for you, Coach, you have to stand on the word of Christ right in the middle. And that's where we try to promote our players is I think the world identifies us black and white, but God doesn't. We are his kids. And I think that's the message that we try to say to our players is if you take one side or the other, pro-black, pro-white, you're going to be divisive. It's going to hurt somebody, no matter which side of the fence you're on. And most of it is because of cultural history. So what we talk about with our players is you are created new. You are forgiven. You are loved. We all deserve hell because of our sin. So let's provide forgiveness and let's provide peace. And let's try to engage people in a loving way that actually changes. Because I think the thing that only is going to change this is love being poured out. And people say, well, there's time for, this and that, but it just doesn't change anything. I mean, the stores that are being busted open and the people that are being hurt, that's just hurt producing hurt. So we have to find a way to heal. So with our team, we talk about it, do it a different way, study the word, see how Jesus's leadership transformed lives and go about it that way. And so, that's the way we address it with our team. What does the word say and what's going to honestly provide healing and not division?
Anthony, I know, I mean, you and I I'm lucky to work with you. So I know we're having conversations, with our team individually and all that. So what's your mindset with those conversations with our players?
I think in those conversations that the players are coming from different spots, right? Like some of them are coming as allies for their teammates who may be hurt. Some of them are coming from people who are experienced as an African-American, experiencing this trauma again on life. And I think when you talk to them about it, I think you have to talk to them relationally. I think Coach Rainbow had a great point when he's talking about how Jesus did it. I mean, one of the hugest things I always say is that Jesus changed the world through relationships, right? Mm-hmm. Like it wasn't through tweets, it wasn't through anything. It was through one-on-one, intimate relationships, and that's how we changed it. And so when I talk to our young ladies, what I try to do is let them talk. I ask them questions. I let them ask questions. I think being able to ask questions and being able to talk, and for those that are experiencing the pain and the hurt as someone of the Black community, I like to be able to let them talk about how they're feeling. What does that feel? And I think one of the coolest things for our young ladies is the young ladies that I've talked to so far who are of color on our team feel like our team is a safe space for them to speak on their trauma. And I think that's important as a coach is you want to make sure that your team it's a safe place for anybody to talk about the traumas that they feel that are going on. And I think as I talk to them, we talk about the idea of how do we create change. And I'm very honest to ask them. Like, I think they, as 20-year-olds, have a great idea on how to navigate their own generation, right? Like, I think it would be very arrogant of me to give them all the solutions on how to navigate change in their own generation. I think I ask them, I talk to them, I say what I think, how I think it should go. We kind of have conversations about that, and just how we not, and give them a space to speak. I think so often we talk at people rather than giving them spaces to speak and speak on how they're feeling and what emotions that this is bringing up. And I think that's huge for letting them feel loved and let them feel like this is a safe space, is being open just to create space for them to speak.
Yeah, and Yana, you're a different perspective, right? You just graduated, so I'm going to kind of spin it a little differently. Okay, so continue putting yourself as a player a little bit. How do you want your coaches to approach this? How, like, as a woman of color, you know, this is important to you, right? This is a generational issue. And so how do you want your coaches to approach, but also the conversations, what kind of conversations do you want to have?
Honestly, coming from a player standpoint, I would have wanted to have a relationship before this even started, because you can sit here and say that you care or whatever when something hits the fan. I want you to be genuine before it's real issues. And then that's when I will feel comfortable enough to be like, okay, this is how I feel. This is what's going on. And this is how I feel that you can help. But if you never create a space where I feel vulnerable or willing to be vulnerable in front of you before anything goes bad, I will never be able to come to you when it actually hits the fan. And so I think what happens is, when you look at a roster, especially in basketball world, it's a 15 people, and I know it's difficult to break down the time to spend and be intimate with each player. And so sometimes I feel like coaches pick and choose those players that they're built relationship with or whatever. And so the relationships tend to be different throughout each individual on the team. And so though one may feel comfortable coming to you, telling you their personal issues and their deeper spirits or whatever, the one sitting at the end of the bench has nobody to talk to. And that's where the confrontation comes in, because you're just representing the ones that you have that relationship and that bond with. But the ones that you don't communicate with and talk to on a consistent basis, they can't relate to you. There is no safe place. There is no, vulnerability. There is no question. You're not going to get that because you haven't built that foundation where they feel like it's okay to come to you with their brokenness. And so when you try to come in and you try to tap into us when it's a worldwide issue, it looks fake to us. It's just like, it's not real. You're just here to save yourself. And so I think it's important for coaches to set a foundation of this from the beginning so we can feel comfortable to come to you in times like this, because history repeats itself because people are comfortable with history. I feel as though when people really want change, they're willing to be very uncomfortable. Like when you think about Barack Obama, he had to be very uncomfortable to get to the place that he wanted to be. But because we're protesting, we're rioting, we've done this already. Like we're comfortable with doing this. But who like with I tell my teammates and my friends all the time, like, are we going to hold ourselves accountable and take ownership with the part that we play into where we are in society? Because that's important. Like we have to take some accountability. We have to look at ourselves in the mirror and be like, okay, this is the part that I played. Maybe I was ignorant. Maybe I didn't know better. Maybe whatever. But what part did I play? Because in order for all of this to change, in order for all of this to be better and move into the right direction, we have to look at ourselves and change individually. When you think about when Rusty talked about peace and love and all that is the main focus that should be the main focus of it all. It shouldn't be anger. We shouldn't feel entitled. We shouldn't feel like the victim. Of course, what has happened is absolutely wrong. But we played a part in being in the position that we're in right now. And until we're able to realize that and understand that, we will continue to have history repeat itself because we're comfortable here. We're not willing. Everybody talks about change. Coaches talk about change. The world is talking about change. But you have to be uncomfortable in order for real change to happen. And I don't think my generation is really ready to be uncomfortable and step into the fire to allow change to happen in the right direction. So the relationships have to be genuine from the beginning. You have to be uncomfortable from the beginning so that when times like this happen, it will be more force and more power behind it. It will be more realness and genuineness behind it. But it starts before all of this even takes off.
I'm glad you brought up that point about the historical aspect of it, and I think there's a misconception as well, and I mean that in the sense of there's some sort of a feeling of finality at times, and what I mean by that is if you take the history of what it means to be white, you go all the way back to when this country was started or before. And one of the main points, I think, of our independence, so to speak, in the United States was that all people were created equal. But it's a great concept and it's a great thing to say, and I think everybody felt good about that. But the reality was, at that moment, that really only pertained to white people, and everyone else didn't fall under that umbrella. And I know through the years, as we learn history, and we learn government, and we learn all of these things, I don't think there's enough white people that think about it and say, wow, that's how we started. All people are created equal, but not really, because African Americans weren't counted as full people. A lot of people weren't even considered white. And as you take that through history, you start to see different things. When, immigrants came to this country, my family are Italian immigrants. We weren't considered white when we first came to the country. We had to try to earn the privilege to be white, which, if you think about that in a greater context, that's a terrible thing to be thinking about. But that was where my ancestors tried to get to not be discriminated against. If you think about it in a grander scheme, women were given the right to vote. Given by whom? By white men, the opportunity to vote in the 1920s. And that wasn't all women, that was just white women, or who was considered white. And you move longer and longer along. Again, 1965, you have Civil Rights Act, you have Voting Rights Act, you have all but again, who are the people that are giving that? Those are all white men that are givings, so to speak, those things. So from a historical concept and an educational concept on my end, we don't learn that in schools. It's not framed, right? I don't think for any of us it was framed that way in school as we grew. So one of the biggest things I know for me during this experience has been educating myself on that concept and more. Because there's no way for a white person in the United States to have any idea what a person of color goes through or their family has gone through for hundreds of years. Because what we've known as normal or as a normal human looks like us. So with that historical context, I guess, how do you approach, and Rusty, I'll start with you on this one. How do you approach showing that or explaining that not only to your athletes and friends and people of color, but also that you understand that, but also your white students, Caucasian students, Asians, whatever, everybody? How do you go about showing that you understand that it's supremacy, I guess is the best way to say it, throughout culture?
Well, I think what you said is really, really good. There's no doubt we can't change history. You can't change what happened in the past, and we definitely can learn from it. There's no doubt about that. something Miss Mitchell said earlier that I think hits the nail on the head is we're doing with what we have the best way we know how to do it. But this generation feels like social media is the platform for change. And I think that's the complete wrong way. I think relationships are the way. I think people have to start seeing people as human. You know, the way you create change in a person is for them to be able to look at somebody differently and humanize them and feel that they're people. You know, me and Coach Mitch talk about it, man. We were at Southern Arkansas. We were in the corner of Arkansas. Me and him both were out of place. And I didn't know him and he didn't know me, but we had this relationship. When I interviewed him, it was about his energy and his perspective. But his family, him and his son and his wife would come over to the house and we just eat dinner. Neither one of us really ever even looked at the fact that we were different in terms of our backgrounds and culture and race. It was just we're people and we both love what we're doing. So for me, I know race is an issue, but I think it just goes deeper to everybody knows what hurt is. I'm a white male, but you know what? I'm a white male in a female sport that's primarily African-American. I have had people tell me, we're not hiring you because you're white. We're not hiring you because you're a male. We're not hiring you because you're a Christian. So what I really believe is I think everybody can associate what it feels like to be hurt. And we pick our battles. Right now we're talking about race, but that same exact day, there was a young man that beat up a young woman, and they were both of the same demographic. Nobody talked about that. But that young lady's laying in a bed beating up with somebody of the same race as hers, and it's like it isn't a race thing. It's a sin thing. It's a hatred in your heart. It's a brokenness thing. And so for me, and maybe I need to do a better job, but I try not to focus on a specific issue other than the heart posture of how we live our lives. My mom, like I said, I'm a country boy. My mom, I'm a first generation college student. She started as a teller at a bank, worked there 30 years, worked her way up to being a VP, was never given a chance to be the president of that bank because she was a woman without a degree. So I'm a man in a woman's world. I fight for female opportunities and rights. I don't care what color you are, because I got to experience firsthand the hurt that our family felt watching my mom do a great job in a small town every single day of her life, but never getting the ability to go to the top because she's a female. So I know what that feels like, you know? And so, like I said, I'm never going to get caught on, hey, pro race, pro gender, pro this. It's just a heart thing. When we start seeing, man, if Miss Mitchell is the best opportunity to lead this program, let's hire her. It's not because she's black or white or rich or poor or played at LSU or played at ETBU. Let's just see the heart of people. And so that's, I don't know if that answered, but we don't necessarily talk about we know it's real, but we just try to constantly focus on, there are no absolute changes. Nothing's going to absolutely fix everything because that's just the fallen nature of man. But the reality is you can't take the social media. If you want to affect the world, your tweet isn't going to affect Minnesota from Marshall, Texas. Get out of your house, walk next door and talk to your neighbor. Get on the phone and talk to people and affect your world, the bubble around you. Love the person at Walmart as you walk in there and say thank you. Open a door and hold a door. That's just an expression of love that will never get magnified, but that's how our world changes. It's just sowing peace.
I agree with you. I think those are everyday things that you can do to just, you're pushing the right message of kindness and love for your neighbor. And Derek, something that you said earlier, made me think of this is that, this historical change, thinking about the history of it, I feel like, and Anthony, you talked about it as well, but Derek, you have to talk to your players about certain things that are things that you have to deal with that I wouldn't have to talk to my players about, or I wouldn't have to talk to, or Brian wouldn't have to talk to his sons about, if you get pulled over by police and those kind of things. Those to me seem like triage for a bigger issue. I don't know if you could speak, if you agree with that or disagree.
No. I do agree with it, and I Mr. Mason and I can speak just what he talked to about sometimes the powerlessness of as much as Coach Rainbow, and that's what he doesn't do is take the bait, because that's what that's why we were able to get along like that, because he didn't see it. Me coming from Selma, you're inherently looking for that. Like he said, he's taking a chance on a gentleman on an online interview based on how his energy was. Like I said again, who he was spoke to me as opposed to what his color was. But that's not all the time. That's not always the case. And some people use that color as their power, as you spoke to initially. And that's when I have to speak to my players about the obvious things. They're black. You know, you can't. That's the immediate. So what we saw in the picture when the young lady, I can't remember her name, when she called the police and said, "Well, this young man is scaring me." Those are things that you can't. You have to first say those things are happening. You can't say that's not happening. You can't brush those things off. You have to. That's why you have to go back and look at history and see these things have happened for a long time. And that's why I say what you see from the rebellion is people are saying enough is enough. And that's why I say it's a right or wrong issue. It's just most of the time these wrongs are happening to people that look like me. And that because when you look at these protests, they aren't all black. They may be 80% black, you know what I mean? But there are whites out there, marching with them too. There are tons of white people that love black people, you know what I mean? But right now you've got to come together and almost agree that the privilege is real, you know, and that's okay. You know, that doesn't make you racist because you've been getting privilege, but just acknowledge that and say, okay, what can I do to use this privilege on a different platform? That's why I told Coach, him using his to speak out is not who he is. That's just not who he is. Coach has always been in the center. So him doing anything different would be obvious to his team that this is not him. That's not indicative of him. Whereas I may tweet. So that doesn't make me any different or make me any right or wrong than what Coach is doing. That just may be how I speak out, how I address my players. And that alone is what I want to make sure that they have a voice. That's why I speak to them as though it needs to be an educated voice, but you do need to use your voice. I encourage them. The social media is okay if you're using it for the right platform. We're not trying to be derogatory or we're not trying to knock anyone down. You know, speak to peace, but also speak to honesty. You know, them retweeting something that's the truth is the truth, no matter what. So I don't mind them doing that, but we're not trying to incite rage, like I said before. We're not trying to do any of that. What we want is truth to prevail. We want accountability for all actions that have been wrong. Black people have been wrong for a long time. Just be accountable for that. That's the start. You know, hey, they were wrong, and then how can we go forward? But throwing away history is a scary thing to those that these things occurred to. So that's my perspective on that, is that we don't want history to repeat itself. So there definitely need to be some changes, but we also want to address history. And me being from Selma, Alabama, my grandmother talking to us about that, you know, me going through Bloody Sunday, that march is happening where I cross every day. So you got the value of that. So that, like I said, again, that's not any slight on anyone else. Just like Coach said, he was from East Texas. I'm from Selma, Alabama. So my view is always going to be different, which is why when I called him the other day, it's always good to see it from a different lens. And I'm open to all lenses. I want to see it from each perspective.
Hey, Coach Mitch, would you talk about to us just like we're all talking about what is, but in your perspective from your past, would you talk about what you think an actual solution is? I think that's the thing that probably everybody is missing, is like, we can see the problem. What from your experience would you say is actually a solution? Because obviously we can see social media. There's a lot of different things trying to go on. And then I'll hear different things like, well, that's not enough. Now you need to give me your home. Well, that's just ridiculous. That kind of stuff, but what is an actual solution that you would say, hey, this is something that why we acknowledge it and we can do to actually promote healing? Does that make sense? Because again,
yes,
it ain't going to change. Something's going to happen in the future. And then we're all going to say, well, we're right back to where, no, we're not, no, we're not.
I totally agree. I think what you're doing now is having open conversations, acknowledging the obvious, what you all are doing on this thread. And not only with you when you're with me, when you're with your 6 friends that are comfortable. Just like when I'm with my 6 friends that are comfortable and telling them how cool Rusty is. And Rusty's telling his friends, well, I got a black coach that's just as cool. And even with any gender, that's how you break any field, is when you don't, whatever you allow, you're encouraging. That's what I say. It's no different than we talk to our teams about. So if you're saying this on this in this aspect, but then you get in the same realm where you're comfortable and you go back to doing those things with people that you're comfortable with, saying derogatory things or witnessing derogatory things and not doing anything about it, that is the change that we're looking for. I'm looking for the fear of am I going to be ostracized in my circle as opposed to doing what's right? Again, and like I said, again, Coach, I think a lot of times it's so hard for you to see it because I promise you, I've met a lot of white people in my life. I tell you this all the time. You're not like most of them. You know what I mean? Like that's just the honest to God truth. But so, and that doesn't mean everybody's wrong, but like I spoke to you being a bit naive, is because you just haven't seen it, you know, and that's a lot of your values aligned with my values. So we always saw that. But what Mr. Mason and I are gonna, I guess, succumb to or have to go against is going to be different what Rusty's going to have to go against. I can speak directly to what he's saying is every time you jump in your car, you're worried. That's a natural reaction, is that you could be doing absolutely nothing wrong, but you've seen so many videos, you've seen so much go wrong, so that's the first thought. Not where you're going, not what you need to get out of the house. Do I have my phone? Is, am I going to make it back safe? Those are real prayers. These parents are praying real prayers about that. And those are the things that when you acknowledge that and speak to that outside in your intimate circles, they change things. That's what I believe, is that these panels are great, but we all call friends and have intimate conversations with, and the relationships that you all spoke to, you have to break some of those chains, or you have to space yourself away from some of those people. And that's why, again, the gal on the panels, we've been friends because we're able to speak with each other honestly, and it supersedes color, and I'm okay with that. Yeah,
and I agree with you right there. That authenticness of yourself in every way, whether it's like you said, Coach, you tweet. You know, I tweet, I try to, you know, constantly trying to put out information that I think can help people, you know, and I, you know, I think that's what you have to try to do, to try to get some mind to think about it on a deeper level and not just accept what's in front of them and sometimes think about it. Yana, what are some things that you do or you can do with your generation?
Honestly, you know, I think my generation learns a lot of things off of trial and error, because sometimes I think that we're, you know, hard-headed and we don't really like to listen to the older generation, and we try to figure things out on our own. I think, you know, for the older generation that's above us, I think we need a better understanding with how we cope with things and how we deal with things, and just being present, you know, because sometimes I feel like the older generation tries to put on us what they did, you know, and how they handle situations, instead of just being like, okay, I hear you out. You know, this is just my opinion on how I think you could be better, or how I think you could handle situations better. I think it's giving us a better understanding, or just understanding where we are today in our generation and our environment. It's not the same. You know, I always tell, you know, coaches and stuff that our generation is sensitive. You know, you guys dealt with things a lot tougher. Your coaching styles and how you spoke to each other was a lot different than how we respond to things. And I think it needs to be a better understanding of not everything that you went through and not everything that you did works for us. And so how do we kind of bring those together, as far as like, okay, I understand where you're coming from. I haven't experienced that. I haven't been there, but I can relate to you. I understand and I sympathize with you. So how can I better help you? Like having those conversations. And once again, it goes back to being genuine, you know, and understanding that right is right and wrong is wrong, and having those realistic conversations about, you know, I haven't been there. I haven't experienced that, but I'm here to help, and I genuinely care about you enough to sit here and listen to you and just give you feedback onto how I think you could be better and help the situation, instead of just trying to force your solution upon me. You know, our generation is very big on social media, because that's the platform that we have. And I think it's a great platform for us, because we can sit here and send a tweet and they'll go all the way across the world, and now we can start the whole revolution on the other side of the world just by our fingers. You know, usually y'all have to do letters and write and all that. We don't have to do that now. You know, so for it to be genuine and real and have a better understanding of where we are and how we are and how we receive leadership, how we receive opinions and solutions, it just needs to be a better understanding of how each other are. You know, I think we kind of are divided in a sense, like this generation is this way and this generation is whatever. But if we could come together and build relationships, genuine relationships, I think we'll be more willing and open to learning better ways, instead of figuring things out by trial and error. Because everything that we come up with is not always right. But we feel as though other generations don't really understand where we're coming from. And so it's hard to sit here and receive information and knowledge from a place where you feel like there's no understanding and no relationship. So yeah, in the relationship and no understanding.
Anthony, same to you. Like, how do we fix this on a day to day?
I mean, I think Mr. Mitchell. I think they both bring up great points. I think Coach Rainbow brought up great points. I think when we're talking about generational, I think one of the things that we miss sometimes is there's a book by Henry Nouwen called Wounded Healer. And he talks about that the violence and kind of the anger and the angst of this new generation, it's not rebellious for the sake of rebellion. It's that they want change and they see a broken system, but they see that the generation before them didn't fix the system, right? And so they naturally are like, well, I'm not going to just take what you said at face value. Like, the system's still broken. Like, so why am I just going to hear what you're saying? And you're saying, this is how we fix it. Well, if that's how we fix it, why isn't it fixed yet? Right? And so I think we have to look at that intergenerational, especially when we talk to our players. We have to be able, like Ms. Ayana said, is listen to what they're saying and what their ideas are and converse with them in the medium. I think what Coach Mitchell was talking about with our perspectives is I don't think we can get away from the idea. I don't think color blindness is the goal. I don't think that's the goal. I think that we have to be able to look at people of different races, different experiences, different cultures even, and say like, hey, I value your experience and I realize that you go through stuff. And I think what he was talking about with when you're talking in your own circles, right? When you're at Thanksgiving dinner and you got that one uncle that says that reckless, little slightly racist stuff, are you willing to speak up and have an uncomfortable Thanksgiving, right? Because like, are you willing to speak there? That's how real change happens daily. It's not like, oh, that's my friend. He means well. No, like if he said something that inherently promotes racism or bias, then we have to be able to speak up and call that out. And I think that's how you can and do that daily. I think we all have people in our friend circles, no matter what color, race you are, we have people in our friend circles that say certain stuff that we know is a little out there. And I think if we want real change and real togetherness, we're going to have to be able to call those things out. But then we're also going to be able to, like Coach Rainbow talked about, is be able to love our neighbor as thyself, right? Consistently and do that. And I think to do that well, you have to acknowledge their experiences. I don't think you can love me well without acknowledging the prejudices and the wrongs that I faced in my life. I just don't think you can love me well without doing that, because you're ignoring a part of who I am, right? And I think that in order to do that, we have to be able to accept the stuff that's happened and accept what's happened in this country and say, hey, this is a problem. And I think it's going to be through conversations. I think it's going to be, but I think a tweet can spark a conversation, right? Like I think a tweet can, but if I'm only tweeting and there's no action with it and there's no conversation with it, then I think that's the issue, right? Like yesterday, me and my friend went to LA and Santa Monica, and we were a part of cleaning up. Some of the conversations that were happening where people were cleaning up what the destruction that had happened were fantastic conversations of people from different races together, cleaning up and saying, yo, I can understand the frustration and rage. We don't agree with the destruction that happens, but let's talk about fixes for that. And I thought that was fantastic. Now, of course, later in the day, you got people that were there just because the cameras were there. But earlier in the morning, I thought there was real genuine conversation about change and happening. And I think but those happen because of tweets, people saying, hey, we're cleaning up here. And I think you have words, but I think you have to follow those up with actions. But I think it's going to come through interpersonal communication. And I think because you can make laws to fix like, oh, we're going to have oversight on the police. We're going to do this. We're going to put body cams on. We're going to do this stuff. But you're still not affecting real issues, right? Romans tells us that a law is not going to fix it, that the law doesn't change the heart. And I think that's only going to happen through conversation and acknowledging differences and acknowledging past impressions and saying, how do we move forward, and having those two intergenerational conversations.
I know we're pushed up against some time, so one last question on the back end of this. I'm gonna kind of expose myself a little bit, and it's what I've been thinking about the last, I'd say, well, more than just a week, but more like a lifetime. But I was born and raised by a mom who hails from Irish English descent, and a dad who's Filipino, but born and raised in Hawaii. And there was an identity thing that I had that I didn't know I had until I got out into the real world. My parents, they celebrated everything, all diversity, everybody. I'm from Oxnard, California, where there's so much diversity. They never said, don't look at color, don't not see color, but they were all about celebrating my Hispanic, mostly Mexican friends, my Asian American friends, my Black American friends, everybody. I have family members who didn't want my mom and dad to be together. And so when we talk about generational trauma, generational change, I think it's very, very important that, what Anthony was talking about is like my wife, I married into a Hispanic family, Colombian Mexican, and she's an epidemiologist. So she is all about generational trauma. She tweeted the other day that, a lot of public health is generational trauma. And now we have two sons. One literally looks like an Irishman. The other one looks like our child. And so we are aware that these two boys could very well have different experiences. They very well could get a different love from society. And so now this is 2 generations from my parents. I'm 2 generations from a life cycle that didn't want my parents to even be together. And now they're going on 50 years. So my question is this: how important is sports and having these real conversations? How important is it to society? Because when you do look at societal changes, most of them do come from sports. Most of them do come from a community that recognizes color, recognizes culture, and celebrates them all. So I'd like for each of you to speak on, where does our role as athletes, as a sport community, where do we need to go now? What is very important? What do we must do for action for this generational change? And Ayana, I'll start with you.
Oh, that's a good one. Doing things like this, using your platform and speaking out, because we are still kind of like on lockdown, so everybody's just like focused in on social media and the podcasting and all those type of things. But the entire world loves sports. Everybody is going to turn in to watch LeBron James and all, like, everybody. And so just using our platform to speak the truth, not be biased on one side or the other. And it's okay to, feel certain things or whatever, but saying what's right. I think that's the most important thing is when we're using our platform, is pushing out what is right, not so much of necessarily of how we feel on certain situations, but what is going to lead us into the right direction of how to be better. Not so much of like, I feel this way and I'm angry and I'm bitter and I'm broken and hurt, but I love all people. And I don't hate to say it, but some of my teammates and friends right now in our generation, not all policemen are racist. Not but not all Black people are threats. And that's just what it is. And so spitting out what is right and fair and equal while having these conversations is the most important thing. And and not being biased based off of your emotional trauma, the things that you experience, the things that your family experienced. Just being truthful and honest and standing on what it's supposed to be, not based off of what you feel.
Rusty, how about you?
Man, she's hard to follow. I want to hire you, Miss Mitchell. You're amazing. I tell you, you just said a lot of things that are exactly what I was thinking. But Brian, the question is great. What I would say is this: you said, "How does athletics play a role?" I think the thing we forget is athletics is designed to win and lose. Education is designed to create change, and everything in our world right now in athletics is I'm trying to win. Well, you think about it, the Black community is trying to win this battle for Black. The white community is trying to win it for white. It doesn't need to be a competition. It needs to be education. And me and Coach Mitchell, the last thing we talked about on our conversation the other day is the fact of we've forgotten that we are educators. And if we don't educate, we have failed. You know, we won a championship 2 years ago, and it's like, that's only as good as the fact that the kids can go out in the world and be great wives, great moms, great employees, great people, and know their identity. Just like you said, Brian, like know your identity. And you're not what you do. You are who you are, and you're who God made you to be. So I'm not a white male that coaches basketball. That's what I do, but it's not who I am. I'm a child of God, and that makes me enough, you know. But I appreciated Coach Mitchell. He said this the other day, and you just alluded to it, Ms. Mitchell. It's like there's racism on both sides. Like I know Black people that hate white people more than I could ever imagine feeling toward people. I don't know that that's ever said, really, you know. And so if we're going to get it changed, we've all got to speak truth. There are white people, just like you said, like I grew up in West Texas. There was racism. There was no doubt about it. But I didn't know that Black people and Hispanic people hated white people as much as they do until I got into this profession and started being around it more. But that's the reality. Like, let's just be real. We all have these struggles. We all need a heart change. And so I think as educators in athletics, that needs to be the message. It's like, man, let's grow up a little bit. Let's be honest about where we're at. It's not one-sided. And we've all got to change. We've all got to surrender me for what's best.
Anthony?
Two things. One, I think sports are a great place because I think you're gonna get a melting pot, right? You're gonna get different people, different ideas, and different things in. And I think being able to have great conversations within your teams, and I think they're gonna be fantastic. And I think when you look at us, instead of looking at Blacks as one team and whites as one team, I think if you look at the whole human race as one, we can kind of explain that sometimes we have a disagreement with our teammate, but that doesn't mean we stop loving them, right? It doesn't mean that they're a bad person. Like, we can have these and move forward. I do quickly want to say I think there's a difference between racism and prejudice. I think that racism is a part of a systematic system of oppression, and I think prejudice is a one person saying I hate another person because of the color of their skin. And so I do want to make that quick clarification that racism is a part of the system and there's prejudice. And I think there is prejudice on both sides. And I think that everybody has prejudice. I think everybody has biases. And I think that we have to be able to acknowledge those biases and be able to say what they are. But I do think we have to realize that racism is a whole different giant, because you can be a benefit of a racist system and not be prejudiced. And I think that's one of the things that we have to look at and start to talk about.
Coach Mitchell, last word, giving it to you.
Oh, man. Just again, before I do start, thank you again for having this conversation. What Mr. Mason just said is exactly true. I think the words that he used is what we were alluding to. I know when I spoke to Rusty, he used those two words. That is exactly right. That the system that again that we talked about that others are profiting on is a different animal. Like you said, again, prejudice is again the hate. We don't want to preach that at all. And bringing it back around to sports, for me, it's just being embedded and having really good roots, because I know those kids are leaving me in their branches. So what they're going to give off is inherently what I'm giving them. Because what I talked to Coach about is that some of these kids, if you're recruiting them for a year and you keep them 4 years, if they're 22 years old, you've had them almost a quarter of their lives. So what you're pouring in, they're going to pour out. So some of those things that you're saying, some of those things that you're doing, don't be surprised if you see that when they're doing it, when they go do their jobs. But if you're pouring into them what they're supposed to have, you're going to see what you're supposed, the fruits of your labor, you'll see that, and you'll see what you're putting out. That's why I'm always cautious about what I put into my kids, and I speak to love. I let those kids know that don't listen to what I'm saying. Let my actions speak for me. You know what I mean? I may say the craziest thing, you throw that ball out of bounds. Please, I apologize, but please, whenever you need something, know I'm here. Whenever you need to get on that phone, know I'm here. No, it's no time that you can't call. No, there's nothing that anything that I won't be here for you forever. This is a lifetime contract. Like I tell my kids, like once you sign and go with me, you here with me forever. You know what I mean? I don't care if you leave, you could transfer, whatever, because I don't hold grudges with children. I was taught that as a young man by a wonderful grandmother. You know, each day is a new day. Who am I to hold a grudge? You know, like I said again, we can disagree. We always disagree. We may not agree with what each other are saying on this panel, but there's no way if Rusty called me and he needed something that I wouldn't do it for him. And I think that's why I wholeheartedly talk to him the way I do, because I feel like that's the same, and that's irregardless of color. And that's why I said again, I'm so blessed to be able to speak on here with you all. I've taken and learned so much from hearing from each one of you, and I think I've gotten now 5 new friends in all colors, all different colors, and everybody. So it was awesome. Thank you for having me.
Well, you all are beautiful minds, and I think you know what we've always wanted to do with this platform is to be able to use it in this way to affect change. We believe in our stories. We should believe in our stories, and we shouldn't be afraid to tell them. So I appreciate your guys' time. Until next time from the bench.